What's going on, guys? And welcome to another edition, a compilation edition of the Warcry podcast. This is everything Bigfoot on the podcast, part two. This features Rod from Lodge Tales, Ghostly Hunter from Hunters of the Paranormal, and our buddy Ryan Knights over at Weird Maine Paranormal. They share, pretty crazy Bigfoot information. And then you hear from yours truly on kind of what I think. I appreciate everyone that supports the podcast. If you have a story, send it in to me, realwarcrypod@gmail.com. If you're on X and TikTok, warcrypod. And then the Patreon is a 7-day free trial. But I'm also trying to roll out a YouTube membership too as well. I want to be available to everybody. That's coming here probably in the next little while. It'll be the same content that's on Patreon will be on, but on the YouTube memberships. So be on the lookout for that, guys. These are some pretty crazy. I honestly forget about half of the stories that people tell me. And I was going through old audio and I was like, I'm going to go ahead and do a Bigfoot part two. Man, I was surprised that I forgot all these stories and this information. But it's really good stuff. And I appreciate you guys who support the podcast. Enjoyed. It's very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Yahola Tiger.
When I talked with Kevin Nez, when I was telling him that story about that CIA agent seeing some type of beast or shapeshifter type thing, in his in the cabin up there. So, it could be really anything, but I don't know. The werewolf dogman thing is just kind of a weird thing to me because, I've had people describe to me what a shapeshifter looks like. I've had somebody who was Cherokee see one in broad daylight in the city here in Tulsa. Eventually, I'll tell that story. And there's a few other stories that are tagged with that, but he had seen one and he described it to me as like someone that's really thin with a coat on. Like it's like a fur coat. So do with that as you will. Let me see what's Rich's here in New Jersey. We have a lot of Bigfoot, dogman encounters, not to mention the Jersey Devil. We have a lot of woods in New Jersey, farmland. The Pine Barrens are 1.2 acres. Northwest Jersey in the mountains have over 4,000 acres of protected lands and a ton of squatch. Call them the big red eye. Interesting. Dang, I didn't know New Jersey had it like that. This gentleman, has sent me his original story. I'm going to read the original story, and then eventually I'm going to do a follow-up because there's more things that I need to flesh out. He has been to that area a few times over the last couple of years and has seen some other kind of weird things going on, such as like he saw a deer carcass that had just I think it was just the liver eaten out, which is interesting. But this encounter goes like this. My encounter happened around 2000 or 2001. I wanted to relate an experience my uncle and I had from my childhood. I grew up in a small town called Hamptonville, North Carolina. Some people pass by it on the highway and literally never knew it was there, never existed. It's just a rural farming community, but there is a road about a mile from us where my experience took place. Growing up, I heard different creepy stories about a particular section of the woods on the end of that road. There was a good-sized creek that zigzagged through and created a couple swampy areas within it. I overheard a group of girls talking on the bus one day when I was young. One of them was relaying a story about her older sister partying and swimming with a group of friends by the creek. She said she saw a figure in the woods that she called the devil. They hightailed it out of there, and out of there after they saw the figure. Fast forward a couple years later, I was probably 11 or 12, and my uncle Frank would visit from Boone during the summer to fish and hunt with my dad and vice versa. Well, one particular summer, we had started fishing on that road. About a half mile down, there was a small bridge. Uh, on the small bridge, jeez, on the path on the right hand side of the road that would lead to one end of the creek. The path was inaccessible by vehicle, so you had to walk about a mile down to get to that particular area. One time, my father and uncle and I had went fishing there, probably around lunchtime. My uncle pointed something out after we parked the truck at the beginning of the path that was underneath the small bridge. It was a blue tick coonhound hunting dog laying dead in the creek, and its stomach had been eaten out. The rest of him was virtually untouched. My dad and I owned coon dogs and hunted regularly at this point in time. And they can be very expensive, and most hunters don't let them just roam around when they aren't hunting, unless he was lost from a hunt. Maybe the owner couldn't locate him. There wasn't a house for probably another mile or two up the road from that particular spot. It was very odd, is kind of what we all thought. Well, a couple weeks later, my uncle had come down and wanted to fish that area once again. My dad was busy, and I told him I wanted to tag along. It was probably around 4:30, 5 o'clock when we headed out. We parked his old black Ford pickup, grabbed our fishing gear, and started our hike in. That area was that area always gave me the creeps, and not just the stories or the dog that we had found, but just the looks and vibes of the area was super ominous. Heavily forested on both sides of the path, all the way down to the fishing spot. That evening, we had fairly decent luck and stayed until it was dark. I hated the idea of walking back in the pitch darkness. We didn't think to bring a flashlight because we hadn't intended on staying that long. As we started up the path, we began to hear on the right side of us in the woods a raccoon screaming. I knew the sound well because like I said, I had coon hunted a lot with my dad. Well, the screaming got extremely close to us, and then it got really far away from us really rapidly. At first, we thought it was two different ones screaming, and then realized what was going on. We could hear leaves and branches being smacked towards the top of the trees when the screaming was near, and we could still hear it, but not as loud when it was farther away. Something was throwing the raccoon into something, and it would catch and throw it back. I've been in the woods my whole life and coon hunted as well as deer hunted since I could walk, and I've never heard anything like this before. Coons are stealthy and can move quickly, but this thing was being thrown over the treetops, like 40, 50 feet higher in the air. What could possibly what could possibly throw this thing pitch black darkness with several trees surrounding and see that good enough to catch it? Now his answer is Sasquatch. Now my dad and uncle had grew up in the mountains of Boone, North Carolina, hunting, fishing their entire lives, and they knew the woods and its inhabitants very well. I've never seen my Uncle Frank scared a day in his life until that night. He said hairs on his arms were sticking straight up from the goosebumps he had. He said I wish I wouldn't have left my pistol locked in the damn truck. He kept repeating, "What in the hell is that?" As we got to the truck, finally the raccoon let out one last ungodly shriek, and everything in the forest grew silent. No crickets, no living things, nothing in the woods was making a peep. We drove back to the house and told my dad about the encounter. My uncle mentioned that what if whatever killed the dog had a hand in what we experienced that night. If you look on the BFRO website, look for reports in Yadkin County, you will find two. One of which is from a former music teacher in elementary school who encountered a white colored Bigfoot when he was a child in Hamptonville, probably 4 to 5 miles from this road. Man, I didn't know I could read that long, y'all. I had no idea I had it in me. But man, that's interesting. Because raccoons are pretty little fierce creatures. They're pretty mean. And for, him to basically have these things like whatever this was, throw this raccoon and kind of like playing ball with it, is interesting. Is pretty crazy. You know. I haven't heard much about, them in terms of like killing and taking certain parts. Now, I have heard that in cattle mutilation, and there have been a few cattle mutilations here in Oklahoma. Eventually, I'll get to that topic too. That's another deep dive. But for them to take a specific organ, to me is very interesting. And if you guys have any theories, let me know because that is very very interesting. Um, Especially when it comes to Bigfoot, or even maybe that might be a werewolf or dogman or whatever it could be. But one thing about to me about Bigfoot that I just don't know how to quantify it in terms of like how to say it, like what I think it is. I've been quoted on other podcasts saying that it's a type of tribe or type of clan, and people always assume that I'm saying human. And it's not really what I'm trying to say. I'll get to the point of saying it like how I want to say it. But what my thought is I think that there's some type of hint of human in that, or some type of intelligent being inside that brain. I was harking back, and I always use this example when I talk to people about Bigfoot. Is it's been on record through oral history. You know, Chito Harjo, when he's messing around in Honeycomb Bluff in Eufaula, around that area, that he was taught how to do those things, and he had used that at Honeycomb Bluff to evade, uh, I guess you could say, the prohibition, federal agents, and there's this level of intelligence that's more than just a monkey. Now, we all seen Planet of the Apes. I've done a review over it. I don't know if it's that level, but I think it's enough to where they know how to take care of themselves. They know how to do the old ways. From the root, of the plant, using different types of plants to fix certain things, or excuse me, to not infect certain things too. And that's one thing about that. And I always have non-natives being like, "Oh, well, are you saying they're using magic?" And I'm like, "Well, maybe, yeah, but like, the cloaking thing always comes up. Like, how did I see it and it stepped over and it's gone? Yeah, it could be camouflage, but I think also too, I think it's they know things. They know how to navigate through their living room, essentially. Like, not saying that I'm sitting on my couch and I'm like a chameleon, but like in a sense of they know exactly where to go if they see something they don't know. But also too, I also think too that they know things. I always say medicine, and medicine is used in a lot of different ways. I always hear people say, "Oh yeah, they're using practice medicine. They know things," or like, "Oh, that's that bad medicine. Oh, you're on bad medicine." Things like that. But maybe that's true. And also, I have another theory that like people always assume, "Oh, natives. If you're native, you look native, and this and this. You must know the old ways." And my thought is, I look at different tribal nations, and I look at Bigfoot as similar when it comes to their ways. I believe that over time, through with natives, well, I know over time, we have had things taken away from us. We've been essentially bred out in some family lines. More white people, trying to, Europeans or colonists, marrying in, and you lose the original ways in certain family lines, family lineages. And that's kind of what my thought is about Bigfoot, is that I think that there are some clans that know things. Matt Sieber from East Tennessee Bigfoot had his crew have an encounter with one of these Bigfoot that was messing with the technology. And a crazy story that I have that it made me think when he told that story was I was out at my grandma at her headstone, and I had just bought my parents for Christmas, or Christmas or one of those holidays, had bought me a camera phone, like a brand new phone. Like I said, I might have been in college still for Christmas or some one of those holidays. And when I went to take a picture, it was blurry of her headstone. You know, in the areas around her headstones, it was blurry. So then we go back to I go to take another picture of something else, and it wasn't blurry anymore. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what's going on with my camera. And I remember telling him that. Now, I don't know, it could have been the camera. I don't know. But hearing that reminded me of, when Matt was telling that story about his people getting their stuff messed with. I- She knew things. And like I said, I think that clan that they were running into in that area knew things. And so it's hard to it's hard to like communicate that thought to people who believe that Bigfoot is flesh and blood, or Bigfoot is interdimensional, or Bigfoot is this, that, the other. And that's like the divisiveness that I absolutely can't stand about the Bigfoot community, because everyone thinks they know everything. I'm just giving my theory because I'm just like, that's very interesting, because I've heard different things that fit with in the way that I see things in my head. Because I think of, like I said, medicine's always passed down in the family. It's not given to someone else outside the family and then they start it. Oops. They started. But it always it always trickles down into the family. So once that person stops doing it or doesn't want to do it, it's over. Like it doesn't, unless they have permission to teach or whatever, however it shakes out.
Being around all the different tribes, I heard a lot of ghost stories there. So that just knowing that there's so much out there, and at the same time realizing that a lot of indigenous people are reluctant to share on social media or podcast formats or anything like that. And I wanted to create a place where they could come and share freely. See, because a lot of these natives and indigenous people were sharing with non-natives, and I could tell sometimes um, the reluctance in in
Mm-hmm.
their voices that they were, kind of struggling with it. So it's always easier to talk to a fellow indigenous person about these things, because we don't feel like we're judged and we're more at home. So I kind of wanted to create something like that, and I've started it off, and I'm 55 episodes in, and it's been going good.
Yeah, man, you have a lot of stuff too, and I was kind of digging through that, and kind of getting you know more towards the beginning, before the podcast and before you started putting this stuff down in audio format. You said you grew up in an Indian school and you went to an Indian school. What was that like, man? Growing up.
It was really good out there in Chamala Indian School. See, that's the second boarding school I went to. I went to the boarding school on my res too. But today the boarding schools are more geared toward like catering to the native student, right? Like there's a lot more history there. There's a lot
Hmm.
more how would I say it? The education is geared toward the native way, I guess. Like you have teachers that'll support you, like, hey, you guys sign up. Here's a drum group right here. They're having drum practice, or things like that. There's going to be a sweat lodge this weekend if anybody wants to go over, just to put out the word. They're going to be down there and it's starting at this time. And that's kind of how the school went. It was like that. It was pretty good. It was really good.
Yeah, where I'm from in Tahlequah, we have Sequoia High School, and it's got dorms and all that stuff. So I'm a little bit familiar, but I just thought it was always interesting, to hear it from different parts of the country, especially you hear all those ghost stories out in these different older, boarding school type places. And when you were at those schools, what were some of the ghost stories or stories that you were hearing from different people?
Well, some of them would be like, they would talk about different spirits from where they were from. Like I would hear of little people from Alaska. I would hear of skin. I really don't want to say that. The skinwalker. I
Yeah, I mean,
guess I
that's
don't
like,
mind saying it, but
yeah.
because it's not my tribe, but still there's a stigma around that. So
Hmm.
I guess for all intents and purposes, I'll just say SW on this podcast. But
Hmm.
I would hear stories of them, these things they call stick people or stick Indians. I remember them saying they were called. Different sorts of little people, I've heard of, and uh, alcohol spirits, things like that. I would hear a lot about stuff like that, and the school itself kept us supplied with our own experiences. We used to look out. My roommate and I used to look out across the to the cafeteria from our dorm room at night, and we always heard stories of people like, yeah, if you stare over there, late at night for long enough, you'll eventually see things moving around. Well, there's so many different beings like that, entities like that. There's a horseman, um, dog man. There's a goat man. Uh, I've even heard of this bunny man, believe it or not. Sounds really strange and goofy, but yeah, bunny man. There's all these different things like that. And, of course, you got the Imoyitapi too, that Bigfoot. They're all these man, ape. They're always these things, half man, half something, or whatever.
Hmm.
But I think myself that they're spirits, but they have the ability to become physical. They have that ability to walk this land if they want. But I don't think they can do it all the time. They do come here, they are seen, but they can disappear just like that too, just out of thin air. They can influence things here, you know, by like a goat man can get you to go gamble. He can get you drunk. He can encourage you to do misdeeds, things like that. And you'll see him, you'll be talking to him, he'll buy you drinks at the bar, that kind of thing. Um, so these other ones too have an ability to influence things going on here, but they ain't real. Like as we think real, like humans are real.
Hmm.
They're not like us. What we perceive to be real. They're like spirits, but they have the ability to influence things, to appear real, to even grab you, throw you. But like I think with Bigfoot, I think there's a physical one of it that must hide or got medicine that can disappear, do these things. Then there's also a spirit, just straight spirit of those too. Those are the ones that become the helpers of certain holy people, things like that. They have Bigfoot medicine.
Hmm.
So I think it's a wide spectrum, but in general, I think they're all spirits, is what I think, and they have the ability to turn real, except for that Bigfoot. I think I think the ones that are just straight physical have really powerful medicine. If they're not
Yeah.
if they're not a
Hmm.
spirit.
I believe the same thing. I just, that's one thing that I always, I have people misquote me a little bit, say, "Oh, it's, you think it's a tribe of people." Because Cherokees, we believe that they're kind of a secret tribe type of, thing where they're their own, they have their own ways of life, and they understand how to evade us, and they know how to disappear. And one thing that I always find interesting about Bigfoot is there's people that say, "Oh, well, they have cloaking ability, like they can just snap, and go invisible." And they try to do the scientific thing where it's like, "Oh, well, if it's standing next to a tree and it turns its head and the sunlight hits just right, and they can disappear." But I've heard stories, you know, back, especially like before, things are how they are now, of people basically sitting on one and they think it's a stump and they get up and they kind of turn back and there's nothing there. And what, the stump they sat on was a Bigfoot. Um, that what's a crazy legend, that I always like to talk about because it's interesting to me is there's a man named Chito Harjo, and he was on the run from the federal agents during, I think, Prohibition era. I think is what he was doing. But he had a snake gang, and my ancestor Edward Scott was a part of that snake gang, and Chitto would talk about Bigfoot bringing him medicine and showing him how to quote unquote cloak or disappear basically,
Hmm.
or turn into a stump or become a bush, or and my grandpa always said this growing up. He said if you don't want to be seen, you have the ability to not be seen. And I always thought that was interesting, kind of, that whole dynamic with Bigfoot.
Yeah, because you can't measure medicine with any of these science tools that we have today. That's not how you measure that. Is there a way to measure it? I have no idea, but you can witness it and you can experience certain medicines. You can see that they do that. A lot of times they're called miracles in other religions. The miracles, how they do that, and that's what that is. Because that Emoyitapi, he's more in tune with nature than we are. You know, if we're just measuring his bushcraft versus our bushcraft, geez, he's like, we might as well just be newborns, and he's a well-educated older man. you
Hmm.
know, they are so good at living with nature and all that, and when you live out there with nature, that's where all the life forces, that's where all the spirits are. Of course, you're gonna start, being closer to those spirits, and they'll teach you things, and you'll be able to learn from them because in our way, we live in this duality where we have this physical world and that spirit world, and they a lot of times they're connected. So those spirits do come around people that are humble, that don't, like say this Immoyitapi, like if I was to compare it to us, say there was people using medicine in bad ways, it would come back really hard on them. I suspect that they have the same set of rules they have to abide by when using medicine. That's why they're not, creating tornadoes to just devastate a whole town, because that would go against, you know, their medicine. So they can't do that. They're not allowed to do that, or so it'll go away. It'll just disappear. They'll take it back.
Hmm.
So I think they kind of have these same sort of restrictions that we do. And a lot of times, I mean, here's a story, an old story. This guy named Suncalf who got in a fight with his dad up in Canada, and he ended up hitting his dad and knocked him down, knocked him out. Thought he had, killed him. So he took off, and those Mounties were chasing him, and he hid in one of those old death lodges where they had the bones in there, just kind of all piled up in there. He hid under a lot of those. He could hear those Mounties coming around, and finally they left, and he was too scared to get up, so he just stayed in there. And when he stayed in there, he was hearing voices. There were people talking. It's like, yeah, let's take pity on him. He came here for a reason. Let's help him. And then another voice would say, no, no, let's just kill him. Yeah, we're just gonna kill him. I think,
Mm.
yeah, we're just gonna. They just kept talking, and finally, because he thought he had, made his dad pass away. So he says, well, if you're gonna do that to me, then do it. And then the other ones start talking. No, let's help him. Let's help him. So that night they gave him a bunch of medicine. Those different spirits gave him medicine. One of them was to unlock any lock, to go invisible, to travel, to doctor, to heal people. Like I want to say he had that doctoring that fixes pregnant women. When you're carrying a child, you can't use a lot of medicine. Well, he had that medicine to heal them.
Mm.
Different things he got. Well, he finally went and turned himself in, and he had all these medicine pouches like around his neck, and the stockade that they put him in was just a hole in the ground where all
God.
you could do is just stand up, walk in a little circle, and there's just a bench carved out of the dirt. And they had him in that for the longest time, and they got uh, a new what is that called, guard or whatever, prison guard there, and these were Indians too. They were, and that older Indian was just kind of looking at that younger guy. He says, "Why is he wearing that stuff? Nobody gets to wear things like that. We should take it from him." He says, "I'm gonna take it." And so he did. He took it from him, and he was just gonna bring it to his house and, like, store it so it wouldn't get lost in that place, I imagine, but geez, he was riding his horse home, it was gone. He couldn't find it. It was gone. It wasn't in his jacket no more, and when he gets back the next day, he's just kinda walking around in that down there, and he's got his medicine pouches on, and they had him shackled too, and his shackles are off, and he's just kinda walking around down there. I look
God.
up at him. And so he stayed there for, like, 3 years,
Dang.
and he figures not in just that, they move him out too, but,
Oh, okay.
all over the place in there they would, but that was one of the places they kept him too, was in that hole. So they would move him out and put him in a regular cell and whatever, but one day he said, "I think I stayed here long enough. I think I'm gonna leave tomorrow. Like, I've done my time. This is fair for what I did." And, because he didn't unalive his dad, he just thought he did.
Mm.
So he's like, "Alright, so I'm gonna probably head out tomorrow." Geez, when they were doing count that one time, they were doing head count, he wasn't there. And so they start riding the direction they know he lived, and they seen him cross over this one hill, and they'd ride up to that hill, and he was just walking. By the time they crested that hill and they were getting ready to ride down on him, should have just been over that hill. Geez, he'd be plumb across that valley, just going over the next hill. And they couldn't catch him because he had that ability. And finally, he went back again and he left again. And this time, when he left again, he'd just make himself totally invisible. They'd just ride right by him. He'd just keep walking and get home. He ended up living his life out in Glacian, Canada, up that way. And he married into the Cree tribe, and he doctored those Crees for a long time before he finally passed away. But
Mm.
that's medicine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's like Bigfoot medicine right there.
yeah,
You
for
know?
real.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, that's like, it's just crazy 'cause, you saying that, uh, I mean, I don't know why, but, you ever heard of the Oklahoma, Girl Scout murders? You heard of that? Uh,
No, I haven't.
so there's a Cherokee guy, uh, Leroy Hart is, I guess allegedly, I'm gonna say allegedly, but he had murdered uh, these girls at this camp, and he was on the run for quite some time. But what he would do, and they said that he had that medicine to kind of evade,
Mhm.
and there'd be times where he'd be sitting across the police station, just kind of hanging out, and the police would be like, "Oh, we got him, we can get him right now," and so they go try to go get him, and they look over and he's like on down the way, like he's just far enough. But yeah, that reminded me of that, and the one thing, and I'm sure you have a plenty of Bigfoot, but have you heard any stories about Bigfoot kind of being evil or kind of being, not the nicest?
Yeah, there are stories of that. The ones that come to mind though are really, well, alright, I'll tell this one. Um, Geez, kinda hate to tell this one, but I'll here we are. Oh, okay. So here was this guy back home, and I'm gonna keep it really general, really in general. I have a friend that was talking to me about this, seen the pictures, um, talked to this gentleman that this happened to, told me the whole story because he actually investigated it, told me what happened there. And so according to my friend, this is what happened, but I know the guy this happened to personally. I know him as well. And okay, so as it goes, he keeps getting bothered at his house, um, where he'd hunt and he'd have his deer hanging that would get stolen. Doors back there would get broke open. Things were getting disturbed and, you know, kind of being a nuisance. And then one day his dog ended up killed and thrown on his front porch. And that must have really kind of pissed him off. The last straw. So he posted up and he waited and he waited and he waited. and he waited. And he had his rifle with him, and one of those Imoyitapis came out, and he shot it, and it goes down, and this huge one comes out. So he figures he shot a female. This huge one comes out, and it's holding it in its arms, and it's screaming, like screaming at the sky, like it's really sad. And this guy starts taking pictures of all this.
Oh my
He's
goodness.
taking pictures of this, and that thing stands up and carries that body off. And right after that, things pick up. I mean, even his horse was killed and thrown on his front porch after that, and a lot of other things have happened. And he had pictures of these things that were going on there and what happened with all that. And so, yeah, at times, I don't know if they're bad, but I mean, to kill a dog and just throw it on your porch, I think that's bad
Man, that's terrible.
myself.
Golly.
So, yeah, some of them can be, but see, traditionally, these people, because most natives will describe them as a people. We won't say that they're an animal because they're not an animal. They're like a people. They're their own people. They predate us. One other word translates to the nowhere people. We don't. They're nowhere. And another one is don't know where they come from. Translates to that too. So they've been here for a long, long time. But what they used to do for us, my tribe, is when you'd go out and you'd fast, they would protect you out there. They make sure no bears, mountain lions, wolverines, anything gonna get at you, enemies. They would keep you safe out there while you're fasting. Or for people that don't really know what that is, the other word they use in mainstream is vision quest. But it's fasting is what we call it. And so they would protect you while you were doing that. They kind of clear it out and make sure that you're all right and you get back okay. And your fast goes good, but they would be in the background. They're there. They're just watching over you. But that was one of the traditionally the I guess role they played in the average Blackfeet life was that. Aside from the medicines and things like that.
Yeah, I mean that's I've heard stories of them being out. Um, there was I can't remember what I have the audio, but I can't remember exactly what tribe this was. But they were at the grounds, at the ceremonial grounds, and they had that drum going, and all of a sudden they look over and there's you know Bigfoot, you know, kind of on the edge of the clearing. They could see him. He was out, and it was sitting there swaying like it was swaying to the drum beat. Have you heard anything like that, or heard anyone tell a story about that?
Yeah, the swaying. My wife seen one when it was doing that, but it was up in a tree and it was like standing on one branch, reaching above its head, and it was swaying but making that whole tree move. And it ended up chasing her out of there. Long story short, it paced her. She was running on this dirt road and it was in the trees and it was a short one, like small, she says, but really powerful. That thing was powerful. When it jumped that 30 feet down, it barely made any noise.
Dang.
Said it should have been a big giant crash, but it wasn't. And she was out picking peppermint by this slough. And when it jumped, well, she said it got quiet. That's what got her attention. She said, "Oh, it got so quiet. Even you know, even the insects." She said, "I couldn't hear the river anymore." It got really quiet. So that's when I heard that swishing sound. I looked up and I seen it, and it was looking at me. Then it kind of tilted its head, cocked its head sideways, like should I or should I not? She said it really scared her. I said, "Well, did its face look like ape-like or human?" He's like, "No, it's human, like
Hmm.
almost really human." And she said it was short though. It was really short but powerfully built. And says all of a sudden it just dropped from that tree. That's when I bolted, and it was just toying with me. She said it could have caught me. It could have harmed me, but it chased me all the way back up to that house.
Man.
Yeah,
Jeez.
there's so many of those things around. Like Uncut Savage was saying like there's a spectrum of them. There, because of that balance that exists in the universe. There's always going to be some good and some bad and everything in between. Some of them want to raise hell. Some of them want to help. Some of them don't want nothing to do with nothing. But you go further north into Alaska, they're really mean. They're, like aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Really aggressive. You listen to those Alaskan stories about them. Those natives up there, they're mean. This one guy got a rock thrown right at his head. If he didn't lean down to tie his shoe, it would have taken his head off. He said he was really lucky that day, but they got the heck out of there.
Wasn't even a pebble. It was like I bet it was like a boulder.
Yeah,
Cause
big old rock.
man, yeah.
I'll tell you what got me into it was it would have been in November of 1994. I had moved down here with my cousins to go to college, and I just absolutely loved to deer hunt. And during October of that year, I had gotten my first deer with a bow, and we was excited and everything. And we hunted this little farm. It was an old guy that he would go down to Florida for the winter. So a buddy of ours, he kind of watched over the farm. So we got permission to go in there, as long as you don't tear nothing up. So basically we was all going in there to hunt, but we were watching out for the place too at the same time. And so me and my cousins back then, I didn't have a tree stand. And I do now. I hunt out tree stands, and I didn't have a climber or anything, but I hunted down on the ground. And it was opening day. It was opening day of gun season. And when we left the house, we left an hour early because we wanted to get there before daylight, because we figured they would run the other hunters would run the deer into us, in the little area where we was at. And so prior to this, we had went in there and scouted and everything, and my cousins were going to hunt on the outside edge of the field, overlooking the fields, to maybe get some shots at deer running by on the field. Well, I went inside the woods about good 100, 200 yards, but I went back in the back of this little woods, and it connected up to this great big section of woods, like a deep section of woods. But in this area that I picked out, I was standing up on a ridge top, and I was overlooking an area that looked like a bowl, like like a depression in the ground, a bowl. And there was 4 ridge tops that come in there, and I was standing on one of them, but there was one to my left, there was one to my right, and one straight across from me. But if anything come in there, they would come in within 30 yards, and I'd have a perfect shot, perfect broadside shot. If they come down any of the 4 ravines, I'd have a shot at them. So that morning, when we left the house, it was real foggy, and down here where I'm at, the fog is really, really bad. Like, it's like driving in a bowl of milk when you're trying to drive through this stuff. It's like you got to go real slow and turn your brights off and try to make your way down the road. Well, this was one of those particular mornings when it was just super, super foggy, and it was overcast as well. I remember that. And when it's overcast and foggy, it's not only dark, it's dark. Like, you can't see your hand in front of your face or nothing. And so I decided when I went in the woods, I was young and dumb and stupid, and I probably shouldn't have done this, but I decided I wasn't going to use a flashlight going in the back in that woods. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it is. So I'm in the dark, and I'm feeling my way back there, and I get about halfway back, and I hear something. And so I flashed the light on, and I just kept it down, pointed at the ground, flashed the light on, thinking maybe it's a hunter that, I didn't want to get shot. So I flipped it on. I know it's stupid, but I flipped the light on, and it lit everything up around me. And I could see a doe and a little one standing up on a little rise to my left. And so I shut that flashlight off real quick. And I thought, man, I've already spooked them out of here, because that kind of took off when they seen me. So I thought, man, I've already bloated. I've run them out of here, but I'm just going to keep on going, because I want to hunt, So I get back there. I get all the way back to the back, find my spot, still in the dark. And in this particular spot that I found, there were 4 trees coming up and out of the ground, and you could get kind of in the middle of these 4 trees, and you had like a little natural blind there. So I get in there. I was using an old 20 gauge Remington pump shotgun with a slug barrel on it, and I leaned it up against the tree, and I'm standing there in the dark, and when you're standing in the dark, I mean, time, time, you don't know really what the time is, because it could be a minute or two or whatever. But it seemed like I was there for maybe 10 minutes at the most. And off to my right, where this ridge is to my right, is where the deepest part of the woods is, and I hear movement coming. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is going to be good because the hunters must be moving in here, and they're trying to run a deer in here, or they're going to run the deer in here to me, And so this thing comes down the hill, and it gets right past me. It gets just right past me at probably, I don't know, if you're looking at the clock, it'd probably be at about the 11 o'clock position, just past me. And it's standing there, and it got real quiet. And so I'm looking down in the dark. You can't see it at this point in time. You can't see a silhouette, nothing. You can just hear it walking down in there. So it's no more than 20 yards. It may have even been a little closer than that to me. And so I'm looking down in there, and then all of a sudden, these eyes just appeared in the dark, and they was glowing, and they were like an amber color, like an amber yellow color, and they had these black slits in them. And when I first saw it, my first thought was, are you really seeing this? And my best way to describe it to you is they were about the size of a like a tennis ball maybe, and they were I don't know, they was probably 6-8 inches apart, and they were probably up. I'm guessing they was probably up off the ground about 8 feet.
Man.
And so it's looking right up. It looks right up at me. And I'm thinking to myself, am I really seeing this? Am I really seeing this? Like it's not computing. And I'm thinking the only thing I can think of that looked like it was Felix the cat. You remember those old clocks? That's the Felix the cat with the eyes that move back and forth. Well, that's what it looked like, but a yellow, like ambery color to it. And so I'm sitting there looking down at it. And then while I'm looking at it, all of a sudden, it's not like, I don't know, they call it mind speak or whatever. I don't know. Maybe mind playing tricks on me or whatever. But at first I thought, well, that somebody's coming here with coal miner lights on, and they're messing with me, trying to run me out of here, But the thing about the eye shine, it wasn't eye shine. It was like a bioluminescence, I guess you could call it. So it was lit up. You know what I'm saying? It didn't light anything up around it. That was the weird thing about it.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't light anything up around it, but it was lit up itself, if that makes sense. And so I'm sitting there looking at it, and then I get this message, and it says, I just wanted you to know that I was here. And then it either closed its eyes or turned its head and looked the other direction. And then it started walking off, and it just walked, and it went straight up the hill to my left. And then I could hear it going on out into the field. And something that I've always found odd about this whole thing is, and I know people ain't going to believe this, but this is the God's honest truth. I didn't run. I didn't get scared. I was so bewildered and thinking, what in the world did I just see? I just stayed right there, and I hunted. I hunted the whole time, but I never told anybody that story ever. And never, especially my cousins that were with me, they were on the outside, and I never told them word one of that story. So, that happened. And then I had a friend, he was a Vietnam vet, and I hung out with him for a while. And he was my neighbor, and he'd come down and we'd talk and this and that and stuff. And this one time we got to talking about Bigfoot one time, and he was telling me where the river is here where I live. He said a buddy of his, he said it would have been in the 70s. He said his buddy was running commercial nets in the river. How they got those big hoop nets that they catch fish in, and they have to, like they anchor them down in the ground, tie them off to the bank, and then they harvest the fish or whatever. Yeah. Well, he went to check his net, and he got up under a tree, and he was pulling his net up, and this is what he said: a baby Bigfoot jumped in the boat and just about beat him to death, and he shot that thing and killed it. And he shot it and killed it. He took it to the boat ramp. And he called the game wardens, because he said that thing just about beat him to death. And he called the game wardens, and he just about went to prison over that whole ordeal. They made him shut up and the whole 9 yards.
Man.
So that go ahead.
A second. I'm processing that. And
Yep.
what year would that have been?
It would have been in the 70s. And I think I remember him saying it was like 78, 77, 78 or something like that.
Wow. And so he's a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah, and it wasn't him; it was a buddy of his
Oh,
that
okay.
that went down there. But
Man,
it was
that
somebody
is
that he knew very, very well that wouldn't just make up a story like that. So what I'm getting at, I'm telling you that other people down here have seen him as well. So
man. No,
um,
I 100% because especially it's a different people. A lot of people don't really realize that today is not the 70s. That's why I wanted to know like the time frame of when because
right.
this is because like they're not seeing things like that anymore. Hardly. You don't
Hardly.
hear those
Right.
types of stories, and there's not a lot of people who are just going out. I think it's maybe the convenience of having a Walmart half a mile down the road or within a couple
Hmm.
miles.
Well, they've
But
encroached. They've encroached on a lot of wildlife and a lot of wildlife areas. They've cut a lot of them down. And just in the short time that I've been alive, I mean, I'm 52. I remember this like the late 70s, early 80s, and everything was so much more wild than it is now. And when I say wild, I mean there was more trees back then. There wasn't like subdivisions that they put in or nothing like that. There was a lot more wilderness at that time, but we've since lost that, and they're pushing them, whatever these things are, they're pushing them into like areas where I'm at now, where there's thousands of acres of forest that nobody ever goes in, you know what I mean?
yeah, and so to kind of get back, so you heard that story, and he told you
Yes.
that story.
Hmm.
What other things did he tell you about during
He
that time
told
frame?
me he lived down in an area down around it'd be Vincennes area, but it's called Decker Chapel is the name of the place. And that's the most information that I'm going to say about where I'm at. But anyway, um, he told me that when he was a kid, his dad, they would go to town, and there was an old man that would come into town, and his dad kind of was friends with this old man. And his dad told him, he said, Bud, he said, if that old man tells you something, he said, you can believe it because he's not a man of many words, and he don't just like to talk to anybody, if that makes sense to you. And so he told me he got to talking to that old man one time, and he said he was telling him he was down on the river and he was fishing, and it was getting to be evening time, and he said he watched a Bigfoot come down the bank and start noodling for catfish, reaching up underneath the riverbanks trying to catch catfish. So yeah, that was another one that I had heard.
Man,
So
so he was out. He's out in the middle of nowhere. He's just seeing all types of
mhm.
animals. Did he mention anything else other than Bigfoot being out there?
No, pretty much that was about the gist of that. He didn't nothing else that I know of. That was the only story he ever told me about that. But there was another time, and that we went on the river where I told you that thing had jumped in the boat, and the Bigfoot baby. He said it was a baby Bigfoot. I who knows what it was, but I couldn't see somebody making up a story like that. Because Bud knew him and saw how shook up he was when it happened. So it happened when Bud was around. So Bud knew that what was going on. But anyway, me and Bud, we get in a boat and we head down the river, and that's around the time he was telling me some of those stories. And there was this place where along the river that we would go to, and there was a rock wall, and we'd have to take we go down the main river, and then we'd have to take a little like a creek that flowed into it. We'd take the boat up into that probably about 100 yards or so, and then we get out, and then we go up in the big timber there, and there was a bluff up in there, and where this bluff was, it had writing on the wall there from 1790s. So like people that would come down the river, they would stop there, and then they'd make camp, and then they'd etch their names on the wall and this and that. And it's
Wow.
really a really neat place to see. But what had happened there was there's a lot of limestone down in this area, and there was a great big. I'm telling you, this was it looked like a big boulder, but it's the size of a house, if you can imagine that. And this thing broke off of that rock wall, and it hit the ground, and it created a cave underneath this rock. And so he took me up in there and showed me all that. And so when he was in Vietnam, he was a sniper, so he was good at sneaking in places and sneaking out quiet. And so we go in there, we sneak in there, and I go in and look at the cave, and I thought, well, I'll just go back in there and check it out. So I walked in and looked at it, and then I come back to where he was at, because he was staying along the edge of the riverbank, and I see him, and he is intently looking like he can hear something or see something going on. And I walk up there and I kind of whispered to him. I said, what's going on, bud? And he threw his hand out like, be quiet. like, be quiet. And so we're standing there and we're watching across the river, and here comes 6 or 7 deer running right down along the edge of the river, and coming right behind them. It stayed in the woods. I don't know how far it was back up in the woods, but it was back along where they was at. You could catch a glimpse of them running between the trees, just one right after another. And here come this thing, and it's knocking trees over, coming right behind them. And them deer turn and they head right into the woods, and right straight across from us. But man, whatever that thing was, we was watching the trees fall down right behind whatever they were, chasing those things. I don't. It could have been a Bigfoot. I think it probably was, because the area where that was at, it was about 3,000 or 4,000 acres of woods, and it takes a good to drive back in there. It would take you probably about 20 minutes to get back into there along the river, and there's no houses or anything in there. But I'd have no idea what that was.
Man, I mean, and that's one thing, especially with him. I always, I always have a lot of respect for, for Vietnam veterans, and like for
Mm-hmm.
people. That's one thing about his stories specifically, is that to survive Vietnam, you got to be a bad man. Like you got to be somebody who, can survive. And
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that's very interesting to me, did he I guess teach you any, like you said, sneaking up on things, and
Oh, he taught me a
did
lot of. He was
what,
like a mentor to me. He taught me a lot of things. Oh yeah. My dad was in Vietnam too, and my dad. Like I was telling you before the show, that my dad's got some Native American in him, and you know how, like, in the fall when you're deer hunting, the woods it seems like it's almost a foot thick with leaves that are crunchy.
mm-hmm.
And a little squirrel or a chipmunk, they can't even move without making a noise. So me and my dad was hunting one morning, and he, off to my right, is where he was hunting, and he was probably hunting a good, I don't know, 100 yards away from me. And he he had to come all the way across those leaves to get up to me, and I should have heard him coming. And I looked over in that direction, didn't see him, and I closed my eyes and I looked down at the ground, and just for a split second, I heard something, and he stepped his foot down, and he was standing right in front of me. He never made one sound.
Man,
Never made one sound.
that's
Those guys are tough, man.
yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And I was like, oh, he's a Vietnam veteran, and he's out here, just kind of
Mm-hmm.
being, silent but deadly in these, Indiana woods. I just thought that's really cool. And what do you think Bigfoot is?
I think it's flesh and blood creature, and I think it has abilities that we as human beings don't have. And after I've had that encounter, I've been trying my best to get a look at them, to have an encounter with them. And I know that sounds stupid, but I want to, because I believe that I believe they're good, and I know some people think they're bad, and I believe there could be good ones and bad ones, but I think they know how to camouflage themselves so well that it's almost like magic. And if we could learn from these, we could become better human beings. You know what I'm saying? If we could learn from the Bigfoot. So that's what I think they're real. And I believe where I think they live is, I think they live underground, and I believe they live underground like a beaver would make a nest underground, and possibly because they see them in the creek, around the creeks and small ponds, and they could burrow up underneath a creek bank or a river bank, or even up underneath a pond bank. And like the area that I go to, there's it's a bedrock creek, so it's like got a solid bottom on it. But there's areas there where I can hear the water falling down, sound like it's falling down 20, 30 feet down underground. So here's where I think they're at. I think they're, like I said, underground like that. But if something is that big, weighs 1,200 pounds, and how big they say they are, and they're huge, and they can basically push a full grown tree over, or carry a tree, or throw it, or whatever, then they could pull big boulders out the side of a hill and get in a cave and pull that thing back across the entrance of it, and you'd never even know they was there. You'd never get a crane back in there big enough to pull a thing open. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And
so with Bigfoot, and so
mm-hmm.
that's kind of giving what you think. What do you think UFOs are?
I think they're maybe the progenitors of life here on Earth, and I think I think the Bigfoot are a victim to them just as we are, and that they get upgrades just like we do. That's what I think. But that's about all I can say about that right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so let me ask you
we
this. So this is
basically
oh,
we
I'm
get
sorry, go ahead.
taken, we get taken, and they get taken. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We get
And so,
abducted, and they get abducted.
and so about abductions, that's where I was kind of leading you. I was hoping you'd mention something like that. And so the connection, obviously the title of this
Mhm.
live stream and this podcast episode is the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs.
Mhm.
Can you give me, maybe what you think or what you know of what that connection is?
They use them. You know how well this all goes back to UFO abduction ufology, and there are accounts where people are on board and they see them on board as well, and they say, like, if you were in a state forest and they talk about the 411 people missing in the state forest. Say if there was a craft that was hovered over the state forest in an area where it's remote, nobody hardly ever goes in there, and somebody goes in there to encroach. You know what I'm saying? They go in there and they encroach into their area where their perimeter is. These things are become under their control, and they can control them to go out and abduct people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, and that's interesting. I've heard this is kind of a crazy, and it kind of pertains to Dogman too as well. And I've heard this theory kind of passed around over the last probably year,
Mm-hmm.
is that the the orbs that we see, the UFO paranormal type entity or whatever that could be, is that it's like a runoff effect, that like the UFOs have some type of control or some type of say with the Bigfoots, and the Bigfoot have a say on the Dogman. Have you heard anything about that?
The orbs, from what I've been
Mm-hmm.
told, is they are a sophisticated drone that comes in. They're the scanning devices that come in the area, and they scan the device before an abduction is going to take place. And you know the rods that they talk about seeing. You know what the
Mm-hmm.
rods are?
Yeah, I've heard of them. Could you explain it to the audience?
The rods are they catch them on film, and they move so fast people think sometimes that they're bugs or whatever, but there's a lot of stuff out there you can watch on them. But those rods will they'll dart in and dart out of the area, and right before an abduction they'll see those, and they'll see orbs. And there's video footage where you'll see orbs in the house of abductees, and they say that those will come in the house, and basically it's like they're scanning the area for danger. You know what I'm saying? And they can come in a second and scan the whole area, because their technology is so much more sophisticated than us. And I had a doctor that told me that she was abducted as a child, and before the abduction happened, an orb came down the hallway in her and went into her mom and dad's room, looked over there, and then came into her room, and then she was abducted. And when they brought her back, they put her in bed, and she was like banging her head on the wall, like she had like they had just pulled her through the wall. You know what I'm saying?
Whoa.
So, and that's a doctor that's told me that. So, I mean, they just don't make stories up like that. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
they're they don't want to be the kooky doctor. But
Yeah, they don't want to be the crazy person. Like,
right, because
that
that
could hurt business.
absolutely. But they, friended me in such a way that they, they knew that I would hold their secrets for them. But I mean, I didn't give you any names or anything, but there
No,
you
hey,
go.
that's just fine.
And and that's the thing I hate sometimes about this. People say, "Oh, my source says this and my source says that," and I'm doing it to protect people that I know, because I know that that's things can go wrong real quick. Because I've seen them in the area monitoring things. The like the game wardens, they're involved in it.
In what way? Let me ask you.
Well,
in what way?
I'll tell you exactly what way. I went into. I took my mom mushroom hunting one time, and we went into this state forest, and what had happened was it'd been kind of cold, but we had some rain, and it was in April, so like the temperatures, like the warmest it got would have been about 45 degrees. So this was early mushroom season, so like it would have been like 20s at night, and then it'd get up, and it started. We had a week where it got into maybe like 40s and at noon, but it'd be like 30 degrees at night or whatever. And so the water came up in this place along a creek bed, and it had pushed the leaves out. And so I didn't want my mom falling. I wanted to have a good place to walk around to look for mushrooms, and we thought we'd get there a little early and get to jump on everybody. And so I ended up going in this, got ahead of her a little bit, and I got in this creek bed. I did about a half circle, and then I come up in this little washout. And as soon as I get up in this washout, they say there's some kind of a weather phenomenon that happens when Bigfoot's around or whatever. Now, can I prove it? I can't, but I can just tell you what happened to me. The wind starts whipping up just as I step up on that out of that little washout. I step up in it. It's like like a little cut where the water comes down. So I step up in there, and the wind just all of a sudden it went from looking like a nice clear day, sunny clear day, to overcast, and the trees are whipping around like there's a tornado coming through there. And as that happened, I can hear something just hauling to the north of me. It's just going crazy, running through the woods, knocking trees over. I heard it breaking branches and going, and it didn't sound like a deer to me. I've hunted for over 30 years, and I know what a deer sounds like running through the woods, and that's not what I heard. So as I hear that noise running, and it was running into a pine thicket. And I looked down, and down in the dirt, the fresh dirt where the leaves had pushed out, was a perfect footprint, and it looked like, and it was 4 inches long, and it was just one footprint. It was one right footprint, and if that thing would have took a step, it would have made another footprint. So I stopped, and I'm looking at it, and when you see a little footprint like that, you think to yourself, well, there's a kid in here somewhere, because it was just fresh, man, like it was just made. And so I yelled at my mom, and I said, come up here where I'm at. I want to show you something. And so she circled around, and I said, make sure you circle way around, because I don't want you to disturb the area in front of me where we're at, because I'm going to track this and see if I can, find it. And so she come around, and I showed her, and I said, what do you think that is? And she said, I don't know. She said, that is weird. I said, you think there's a little kid in here? I said, I'm gonna track it and see if I can't find this little kid. And so I spent probably about an hour or so, walking ahead, looking, trying to find it. I couldn't find nothing. And so I finally looked at her, and I said, you know what? I think this was a gift that was given to us, and I think it was probably a juvenile Bigfoot. And so I told her, I said, I'm going home, and we're going to get some plaster cast, and we're coming back, and we're going to cast it. So I come back, and I plaster casted that thing, and I took it to a Bigfoot conference, and I found this thing in 2018, and I met Cliff Brockman at this. It was a Crypticon down in Kentucky. And I had it in a shoebox wrapped up, so it didn't break. And man, this thing looked pristine. It looked really good. And you could see all the toes, everything, the arch of it, everything. And so I took it, and my wife and my mom was watching Cliff Brockman there. And so as we're standing there, there's these people ahead of us, and he's got a picture that looked, it was one of the best Bigfoot pictures I ever seen. And he looked at it, and he looked at the guy, and he said, nice try, like just poo-pooed him, like, yeah, that's a fake one. And so the guy left. And so I walked up there, and I just told him, I said, listen, I said, I found something you might be interested in. I said, I'm not claiming it's anything. I said, but it was odd where I found it, and I only found one footprint, and there should have been more. And so I opened the box, and he starts looking at it, and my mom and my wife is watching him, and he's getting excited, like looking at it, and he starts examining it and looking at it. And then he looks at me, and he's got like all this stuff on the table, and like books and autographed stuff and t-shirts. And he looked at me, and he said, what would it take for me to get that from you? And I said, I told him, I said, well, if you want it, I said, I just give it to you. And he goes, I will give you anything on this table right now for that. If you would let me have it. And I said, I will give it to you because you'll be able to do more with it in a lifetime than I'll ever be, because, you've got good connections and everything. So basically I ended up giving him the footprint, and he wrote an article which you can find it on his Cliff Brockman. And if you go to his official webpage, you can go there and look under impressions, and it says 2018. I think it's the last one on the list, but he wrote a really nice article about it and everything. And he called me on the phone and told me it was one of 4 of the smallest juveniles Bigfoot footprints that they'd ever found. And
Man.
there's some kind of a detail on those tracks that they know about. Like I think it's called some kind of a hinge on the foot. You know what I'm saying?
They call it like a mid-tarsal. Metatarsal
break. Yes. And I take it that had it on there, the mid-tarsal break. And so fast forward deer season the next year, I'm over at well, no, let me go back. It was the same year. I got a nice buck during bow season, and I went and I turned him in. And I was checking in my deer out in the back, and I befriended this guy because I take deer there all the time, and whenever deer season's in. And he was standing out there, and I said, well, I said, you been doing much hunting? He said, no, I ain't been doing much. I said, well, where do you like to hunt at? And he told me the county that he liked to hunt in. And I said, dude, you gotta look at this footprint that I found, man. He said, I told him, I said, you ain't gonna believe this. So I show him his footprint. He's looking at it, and then he looks up at me, and he just it just looks like the blood rushed out of his face, like he got pale. And he said, I'll tell you something here in a minute. Because he had to go back in the thing, and so he left, and he waited because there were some people outside around us at the time, and he waited till everybody left and went inside the house, or not the house, but the meat locker, went in, and he said, he come back out, and he told me, he said, dude, he said, that place over there where you're talking about, he said, I saw 3 of them over there. And so then he started telling me the story about, he saw a male, he saw it was a gray male, he saw a dark colored female, and a little one, a baby one. And while they were mushroom hunting, and he said they threw rocks at him and his buddy, and him and his buddy both saw him. And so fast forward to after the next be spring, I was at a rummage sale with my wife, and I was talking to a guy that was a real estate agent. And somehow we was talking about mushroom hunting, and I didn't say anything about the Bigfoot or nothing. And he starts telling me, my buddy that likes to mushroom hunt, he was mushroom hunting, and he said he saw Bigfoot come down the hill. He heard him, and he looked up and seen him, and he said they locked eyes, and he said it was a big gray one. And he said that thing saw him and spun around and went back up the hill. He didn't try to attack him or nothing. But that's two people in 2 different, in the same area, but in 2 different places that seen the gray one. And my neighbors that live across the street, he's a preacher, and then it's his wife and his dad were coming down our road, and they probably about 7 miles north of where we're at. It was coming down the road, and it was in the middle of the night, and they was coming up a hill. And they saw somebody walking alongside the road, and him being a preacher, they like to take care of like the homeless people and, help everybody out. And when they first seen the guy walking down the road, they thought because it was like late at night, they thought, well, maybe this is a homeless guy, and they was going to stop and talk to him. And so the closer they get, the bigger he gets, the more dirty and mangy this guy looks, and they get right up next to it. And he's walking in the opposite direction that they're coming, in the other lane of the road that he's walking. And he, I don't know if you looked at him or not, but as soon as they got right up there, they were looking out the window. They had to lean down to look up at him. That's how big he was. And they said he just went right up the ravine, like the hill going off side of the road, which is pretty steep in the area where they showed me where he went. But he went up the hill, went down over the bank, and then headed towards the river bottoms. So there's another river bottom connection. And that that area there, those lights I was telling you about, those orange orbs or whatever, I still see them to this day, and I see them in that area. And I sent you some video of that white one, the white one that's taken off. If you watch that video real close, you'll see the white disc. It'll shoot into the clouds, and then if you look behind it, there's 2 white Tic Tacs that follow right in behind it. That's at a quarter speed. That's as slow as I could get it to slow down.
Dang, and that was fast too.
Yeah, and when I took that video, and it I was getting ready to delete it, and I thought, well, I better look I better look and see if there's anything on this while I was at work. So I just pulled it up and I'm looking, and boom, I seen that thing streak across the sky. And here's the weird part about it. The area where I caught it, I was with my wife. We were driving down the road. The sky looked funny, like it was orangey. It just looked odd to me. And then I get that thought and that feeling. I told my wife, I said, I need to record this. I need to take a video of these clouds because I feel like they're around. And that area where I got that video was right where I had that encounter with the eyes in the woods. So that craft that you see right there, there's some more proof that there's some high strangeness going on in this area.
Let me ask you this too.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I want to go back to the question that I'm wanting to know kind of what you think is the cover up of the park rangers. Is that happening?
I think so. I think it is. But I got to think, I don't know if you've heard about the elite hunting parties. You know what I'm talking about? That's kind of a, how I say, we probably shouldn't mention it on the show.
I was about to say, that's kind of a danger.
But anyway, it's going to be either one of 2 things. It's either going to be that, or it's going to be the UFO things.
Okay.
And I think they're using the Dogman and the Bigfoot to basically capture people in the forest. I think that's what they're doing. And when I say they're using them, if you go to the abduction ufology thing, like a lot of people try to poo-poo it, and they don't. But there's a lot of research. If you get to research and you know who to look for, a lot of that stuff has been taken down. And a lot of those people were murdered, or mysteriously come down with illnesses, or were hit by cars or whatever. But they can take those people under control. They can take human beings under control and make them walk on the ship. You know what I'm saying?
And do the game wardens have something to do with this though?
Well, I was going to get back to that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to take you off. I'm so curious about this.
That's okay. Well, when I met when I found that footprint and met Cliff Brockman or whatever, I met a guy he lived in Rhode Island, and he ended up coming, and what he was going to do was he was going to start on one side of the United States and go through where there'd been Bigfoot encounters, and he was traveling all the way to the West Coast, And what he was looking for was, believe it or not, for the Bigfoot, was he was looking for healing, because he had heard that they was able to heal people. That's what his belief was, And I don't think any bad about him or anything. If that's the way he thinks, that's the way he thinks. So I met him, and I was telling him about the eyes that I seen in the woods, and he wanted to come and stay. And I said I'd let him camp out in the front yard and stuff. And I told him, I said, if you want to have an experience, we'll go down there. And I looked on Google Earth where I figured that they might be in that state forest area where me and my mom had found the footprint. And so you're going to like this one. I took him to this place. And so we go back in there, and this was right after I found the footprint. And I took him in, I showed him the exact spot where I found it. The water had come up and down so much, it had washed everything away. So of course it wasn't there, because it was months and months later. So I'm looking, and there's a guy in your chat room here. His name's Bushwhacking with the Rooster. You can see him in the chat room right there. And he goes in and he looks for tree bends and X's and different things, he looks for sign, and he tries to track, so that's what we were doing. We were going in looking for structure, and we're looking for tree bends and different things. So I go in there and I'm looking, and we didn't find any tree bends or anything. So I took him down to this road that we were on. If you go down so far on it, it says the state of Indiana no longer maintains this road. So it goes basically to a kind of a rougher road, and you go back in there, and there's a campground back in there. And so on Google Earth, I looked to see where the largest tract of land was, and I thought, well, if it's going to be anything in here, they're going to be in this part of it, because it's the deepest part of the woods, And so we pulled in. He pulls his van in, and what he had like one of those it was like a, I don't know, it was like a Sprinter van type thing that he'd converted into a trailer. And in his van, he had his pots and pans hanging up. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he had some things magnetized to the wall so it wouldn't fall off while he was driving. But some of that stuff, like if the vehicle would rock back and forth, it would shake, and like make no pots and pans would cling or whatever if the vehicle would shake. So he parks his van there, and we get out. He gets a little fire going, and when he had pulled in, there was like a little pothole in the parking lot. Well, he parked to where one of his back wheels was off the ground, like it wasn't down in that down in the pothole. So like if you stepped up in that van, everything would sway in the van, and it'd make a lot of noise. Like there's a lot of rattles and stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so he gets the fire going, and he's smoking a cigar, and he cuts the back of the cigar off, and he's getting ready to throw that tobacco away. And I said, can I have that tobacco? And he said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I'm going to offer the tobacco to him, and I'm going to say a little prayer. And so I went over to the fire. I did the 4 directions, offered the tobacco, told him, I said, we're not going to try to record you. We're not going to try to take any pictures of you. We're not here to cause any trouble. We just want to have an encounter with you. We want to know that you're here, and we come in peace, and we want to leave in peace, And then I tossed the tobacco in the fire or whatever. And so, long story short, the fire goes down. It gets late. We're sitting at a picnic table, and I had a Native American flute with me, and I since then have learned you're not supposed to whistle in the woods at night. And so I decided I'm going to play him a little tune, like I'm come in peace, and I'm going to play him a little tune, So I start playing the flute, and the fire basically just goes out, and it's dark. You can't see nothing. Like you couldn't even see the hand in front of your face, because we're talking big timber here, like big oak trees and old growth forest is what we're in. So we're sitting there, and I'm looking at him across the picnic table. His van is right behind him. Off to the left of me is where I parked at. And then off to the left of that is some trees that's maybe about 6 inches in diameter. And there's 2 of them that's sticking up, kind of like forked out or whatever, but you can see through those trees, but not in the dark. You know what I'm saying? You can't see in the dark, but anyway, that's the location. So as we're sitting there, I just happen to turn, and I look over towards my vehicle in the pitch dark, and these electric blue eyes light up in the dark. And I said, look, they're right there. I said, he's right there. And he looked over there at it, and it was it looked like to me, it leaned around those little sapling trees, and it had its head cocked at an angle. And they were probably those eyes were about the size of a quarter, but they were almond shaped. You know what I'm saying? Like the bigger round part would have been towards the nose, and then the point would have went out towards the ears. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But they were almond shaped, and they were electric blue, if that makes sense. But they didn't light up to the extent of where it lit anything up like the other eyes. So we're sitting there looking at it, and he starts talking to it, and he said, "Thanks for coming and seeing us." He said, I like your eyes. Your eyes are really pretty. And this thing tilts its head back and forth. You know how a dog, if it's curious, it tilted its head back and forth. But this thing was at least 4 foot tall. At least it wasn't like a dog looking around a tree. They were silent, and so those eyes go out, and then I'm looking off behind him, and in between my car and his van, more eyes appear. So I don't know if this thing walked over there in the dark or if there was another one. And so I'm looking at it, and I said, there's a set of them right there behind you. And so he looked over there, started talking to him again, started doing the same thing. They was about the same height, about 4 feet tall, and blue eyes, electric blue eyes. And I'd never seen anything like it other than those yellow eyes that I saw in 94. But anyway, those finally went out, and then off to my right, another set appeared. But I should have told you before that started, when I hit that flute, we could hear something down in the bottom talking back and forth. And it sounded like gibberish, like that, like this ravine that goes down probably a good 80 to 100 foot, just down, like straight down. and we could hear him down in the bottom, and it sounded like it was kind of muffled, but it was kind of like the what do they call it? The Sierra sounds, like that samurai chatter.
Yeah.
Well, it was like that, and you could hear him down in there, and it was like they was talking back and forth, and they'd be like, rah, 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 back and forth. But before that started, a big hoot owl thing started hooting right beside us in the dark, in this big tree. And after that thing hooted, it sounded like something slid down the tree, and then it jumped from one side of the ravine to the other, and then hit with a big thud, like you could feel it in the ground. And so anyway, that happened. So we're sitting there, and that thing left, or the eyes went out or whatever. And so then one appeared to my right, and then that one went out. And so we were sitting in the dark for a while, and we got to talking, and we were talking about something, and it was like something that was aggravating, like an aggravating conversation of, how like you talk to your buddy about you frustrated about this or frustrated about that. It was one of them conversations. And so he said, he thought to himself, he said, well, maybe we probably should change the subject and try to, go back, because they're probably listening and they don't want to come in because they think we're getting aggravated or scared or whatever. And so I played the flute one more time. And when I did, I set it down on the table, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And I told him, I said, dude, I said, I don't know how I know this, but I said, whatever those things are, I said, they're right behind me. And there was this little hill that kind of went up in the woods right there behind me. And he looks up behind me, and I didn't even turn around and look. He looks up behind me, and he said, man, he said, there's not just one up there. He said, there's 3 of them. And I turned and I look up the hill, and there's 3 sets of eyes right above the hill. They're looking down at us.
Man.
So then those go out, and then we are sitting there again, and the last one that we saw appeared behind his van. And when the eyes went out, this thing either got up on top of his van or got inside of his van and was looking around, because it shook his van. Whatever this thing was, it shook his van. And that happened. And
were you scared at all?
No.
Oh, my goodness.
And I really wasn't. But I'll tell you, I'm kind of, I don't know why, but like, I used to go down the river bottoms and deer hunt, and I bow hunt, and I would bow hunt by myself. And it'd take me 20 minutes to walk along the riverbanks in the dark, and like most mornings I'd have moonlight to walk by, you know what I mean? And we're talking big acreage, and I would walk in the dark by myself along the riverbanks. I never really was scared, but there's been times when I've hunted, I've had things circle me or whatever, but I don't go out in the woods now without a flashlight. I can tell you that. But
man,
really, any of these encounters that I'm telling you about, I know people's going to say, yeah, right. This is a lie or whatever. It's not. It happened to me. I can't unsee it, and I was not afraid. And there is that part of the UFO connection. You know what I'm saying? Do they have a way that they can calm you down? You know what I'm saying? Because I never was afraid. I never was afraid of it.
Man, I'd be out of there. I ain't gonna lie.
I know. Most people. Well, that guy told me. He basically told me. He said, "You're one of the bravest SOBs that I've ever met." And this is an older man, telling me this.
Man,
and
do you think that it's because it's probably because of your childhood and having a mentor like the guy, the vet, the Vietnam vet?
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of just letting you know, hey, I see these things all the time. This is how you interact with them to make it to where they don't try to run you off, basically.
Right. Yeah, I think so. But I've never ran from anything like that.
Well, they never say run. Like they always say, yeah, because like that's when it's like what is it, the predator prey instinct or whatever they call that. Just with any animal, you start running, it's just something in them. I think
I had the only thing that I've ever really been scared of in the woods while I was deer hunting is I was coming out one night and the coyotes was all around, and there was 14 of them that down on the ground, and I had 2 hunting knives on me, and I had both hunting knives in my hands walking, But that's the most scared that I'd ever been. To get back to the game warden thing. So anyway, I saw those eyes or whatever, and he traveled all the way across country. Do you know who Greg Yost is, the Squatch Man?
That sounds very familiar.
Well, he had stayed with Squatch Man before he came over here where I'm at, and he had the same kind of experience with Squatch Man. He saw the same kind of eyes, but the color of the eyes were different. He saw pink eyes and orange and yellow, but he never saw the blue like we saw where I was at. And he went all the way across the country, and he met up with Matthew Johnson. I don't know if you've ever seen Matthew Johnson. Was like an NBA player, and I think he was a psychologist or something like that. But anyway, he's got a place out west where you can actually go and try to have an experience with Bigfoot, because he saw one and it scared him. He saw one watching his family while they were walking on a trail. He went up in the woods and could see this thing watching his family. But anyway, my friend David, he went all the way out there. And he told me, he called me after he got to where he was going out there. And he told me, he said, because he had some kind of an experience out there, but it wasn't nothing like what he had with me. And he told me, he said, I just wanted to let you know that experience that I had with you, he said, that just totally made my year. So after we had that experience with the eyes, I'd found the footprints. I sent you the picture of that little footprint.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I went back a year to the day, because I thought, well, then they're moving through that area in that time of year. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go back in there and look. And so me and my mom, we go back in there again, and we get back there where that footprint was. And I'm not kidding you. There was a tree in there about 8 inches in diameter, which is a pretty good sized tree. It was probably 30 foot or 40 foot tall. And something had bent that tree. That tree was alive. It wasn't like top of a tree had broke over and fell on it and bent it or anything like that. Whatever did this, they bent that tree over, wrapped it around another tree, and then they jammed the top of it in the ground in the creek bed. So it made a perfect bow. And it was probably, I couldn't have touched it. I mean, if I'd have lifted up, put my hand up in the air, but it made a perfect arch, and it was in the exact spot where I found that footprint. It was like they marked that area. You know what I mean? So last, let's see, it would have been last February. It was last February. I go in that area, and I go back in there by myself, and I'm looking around, and I had went down. It would have been, let me think. It would have been west of it was in between where I found the original footprint and where I had the encounter with the eyes with my friend. And so I went in between there, and I bought one of those Nikon 900 cameras that zoom way back up in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing was I was walking 100 yards, zooming in, filming, taking pictures all the way around. There's a guy by the name of Paul Chafin. They go in and they take pictures, photographs, and then they're catching stuff that looks like Dogman and different things like that. And so that's what I was doing. And I was like, old Rooster does here. I was going in and looking for structures as well. But anyway, I'd go in there, I'd move about 100 yards, and then that thing will zoom in way out. I don't know if you can like zoom in on craters with the moon. And I think NASA bought the patent out for it. And I don't think you can even get those anymore, because you can see so clear photographs on the moon with them.
Dang,
and it'll take video of the moon. So anyway, I've got one of those. I'm moving 100 yards through the woods. I go up the ridge top, and I'm coming back out. And as I'm coming out, I get within. I'm up on top of a great big ridge top, but I'm within probably 100 yards or so, or maybe about 250 yards, I'd say, of the road. Well, I'm up there in the big timber, so I'm behind big trees, and there's no way they could have seen me, because I was just barely peeking around the tree. I could hear a car coming down the road. And so I'm watching his car. It comes down, and he may have had a thermal on me. He come down and he stopped. He had some kind of emblem on the side of his vehicle. And what I thought was unusual about it was it had like one of those wrap things on the steering wheel. It was like a pink color or a fluorescent orange or something. And it had some kind of emblem on there, like some kind of a business thing. And so he stops there in front of me. So I waited till he gets on down the road. And he's heading towards where my vehicle's parked. So I make my way out. I go down the road. I get down there, and I get to my vehicle. And I don't know if you deer hunt or not, but hunters are notorious for looking at detail. You know, like you can go when you hunted as long as I have or whatever, you go in an area and you looking at everything, you know, every branch and twig or whatever. And so, and in my dad being a Vietnam vet and Bud, they always told me, you always look at the detail, you know, you're looking for footprints or whatever. They taught me how to track and do all kinds of stuff. So I get up there to the truck. There's a cigarette butt laying right behind my truck door. Whoever it is has come up there and they've looked in my truck window. And so I got in the truck and I went down the road where I found the first set of footprints. So I get out of the truck and it's cool out. It's nice and cool. Like I said, it was in February. So I get out of the truck, I go up, and this creek that with the bedrock in it's got a little bit of water in it. So you got to kind of navigate these boulders to get back up in there. And then once you get in there, it's kind of flat, but you got to really watch because it's slick, you know, slick mud or whatever. And I'd been up in there once before, and it was dry. We kind of had like a little dry spell, and it had dried up the creek, but there was this one little puddle there. And this was before this happened. But anyway, I walked in there and I walked around the corner. I wasn't there maybe a minute. And I turned around and I come back and there was a footprint, one footprint where he had walked in the water and he had walked on the bedrock, and it was probably 14 inches long at least. Big footprint. And it looked to me like he made one leap down off the rocks on one foot and then hopped up onto the other side. And I didn't see any other. I looked around, couldn't find no footprints. I didn't hear nothing either. Dang. And so that specific morning where that car went by, I went down in there, got out of the truck, started heading down the creek. What my plan was I was going to go up the creek, take that Nikon and move about 100 yards and start hitting, taking photographs at, you know, every 100 yards or so, panning around, zooming in, taking series of shots so that I could go back and look at the photographs. So I go over there, I get right to those boulders and get ready to start heading up in there. And I get this feeling like you better pay attention because there might be something here you might want to see. And so I backed up out of that creek and I got out in the gravel. And I kid you not, right there in the gravel was a juvenile big footprint and a adult footprint, and they were toe to toe and they were perfect. And they were right in the gravel road. Like they had come out of the creek. Walked into the gravel road, and they walked in such a way that when a car run over it, it was going to smash that down to where you wouldn't be able to see it. And I'll send you the photographs that I've got of it. I took photographs.
Definitely.
So I made a little short video and was saying, I feel like I'm blessed. I said, this is just awesome. Because every time I find something like that, I feel like it's a gift, you know, like I just feel like it's a blessing, you know?
Well, you were meant to see it.
Yes. And the only thing that I can figure the reason why they're doing this is because my mother-in-law was handicapped. So she was on a walker, and then later on she's on a wheelchair. Well, before I found that little footprint, I took my mother-in-law. I went in there with a picnic table, and I set a picnic table up with balloons and different things like that because it was just a beautiful area, and she really loved beautiful, you know, like nature scenes and stuff, like scenery and stuff. And so my wife, I told her, I said, I'll go ahead, get everything set up, and then you guys come. So we ended up having a birthday party right there in that creek where I found those footprints. And I think they may have been watching, and then I think they may have seen me and my mom in there. And I think they put that. I think the mother either stamped the baby's footprint in the ground to say, I'm in here with my child as well. If I know that sounds stupid, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So I find those footprints. I take a video of it. I talk about it. I was going to put it online, but I never did. I don't know why, but I just didn't. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at those footprints. So I thought, well, I found these. I'm going to go on up in there and look for some more. And so I went up in the creek and I went back where we had the birthday party, and I went right around the corner, and it wasn't probably a matter of a minute, me walking up there and going around the corner. I hear this car coming. So I turn around, I come back out. And as I'm coming out, there's the game wardens, and they stop right in the creek, and they're looking right at me. And of course, when the game warden stops and he's looking at you, you got to go and talk to him because you're already suspect number one because you're out in the woods and you got a camera, so they're going to interrogate you. So I went on ahead and walked on up there to him. So I get up there, and he said, have you what you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just out taking pictures, with my camera. I said, it's real pretty here and I really like it. And so they said, have you happened to seen a car around here, like a little white SUV? And I said, yeah. I said, it got a little emblem on the side of it. I said, does it have a pink steering wheel or orange steering wheel? And they said, yeah, that's it. He said, where is he? Like they were acting like we're going to get him, And so I told him, I said, well, I seen him when I come in. He was down at that other parking spot down there. And I said, and besides that, I said, I seen him go by while I was up in the woods. And I said, somebody got out and looked in my vehicle. And I said, there was a cigarette butt on the ground that wasn't there when I got out. I said, somebody got out and looked inside my vehicle. And he said, well, did they take anything? And I said, no, they didn't take anything. But I said, somebody was looking in there. But I said, yeah, he's down there at the next parking lot. So, like I said, they acted like they was going to go get him, like he was busted, they was going to get him. And so I let him go on down through there, and I waited about 5 or 10 minutes. So I go and I get in the truck, and I head down that way, and there they are down there with this guy, and they're talking to him like they're best buddies. And I know he's some kind of a tracker. Just the way he is, you can tell he's one of them people that go in and they can track stuff. I can just tell by the way that they're going at it. And it was just like they knew that Bigfoot had been in there somehow, and they run over those tracks. They covered those tracks up when they went through there, but it was because those Bigfoot had walked in the road. And I thought, man, that is so smart. They're walking in areas where they know that the traffic's going to cover their tracks.
Oh,
that is sophisticated. That's beyond animal, man. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And a human being would do that. You know what I'm saying? A human being would do that if they were smart, to hide.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's interesting. No, I just kind of, so the guy that was, so they went down and they were like, did you hear anything that they were saying?
No, I didn't. Because I thought, I'm just going to get out of here because this is weird. There's activity here. There's footprints. There's big footprints here. They've just showed up just as I've showed up, and I've literally just found it, and they're right there within minutes. Now, could it have been a coincidence? It could have been, but I think there's something about them that they know that they're real, because I worked with a guy that was a state policeman from Maine. And he had done all kinds of things. He was an anesthesiologist. He was an anesthesiologist. He'd been a pilot. He flew like private jets around, flying people around in private jets. And he was a state police officer in Maine. And I asked him one day, I said, so do you think that Bigfoot stuff's real? This was before any of this happened to me. And he said, man, he said, I know they're real. He said, I knew the game wardens up in Maine, and he said 2 of them told me, they said, it's absolutely real, and we know all about it. And then I had Bobo from Finding Bigfoot. I talked to him when we talked to Cliff Brockman, and my wife and my mom was standing there, and my wife started talking to him, and she said something about, well, you think they're real or whatever. And he looked at my wife, and I didn't even ask the question, she did. And he said, yeah, they're real. And he said, we've got the evidence to prove it, but the networks won't let it be put on the air. So there you go.
Why do you think that is?
Because there's a connection to the UFOs, and they don't want us to know about it. They don't want it, because once that cat is let out of the bag, that these things can come in, they can come and snatch you. And you know what I'm saying? Like these UFOs can come in, or aliens or whatever, come in and snatch you or whatever, then it would just create mass panic. And then if they have something to do with our DNA, like manipulating our DNA, because all of the abduction experiences that like the alien abductees, that's what they are shown, that there's a hybrid program underway, that they are mixing human and alien DNA to the point where they're going to walk amongst us and you're not going to know.
You know what's crazy? I'll tell you this. So I was told this. I don't know, I might have been a elementary, middle school age kid, and I have family members who can testify to this, but and now I don't like using the word testify, but they know what I'm talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
long time ago, and I might have mentioned this before, but the star people came down
Mm-hmm.
before removal
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
gave these tectonic type plates to each tribal town. And this is Muskogee Creek uh, information. And these plates were given to these different tribal towns to hold.
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't. I was never told what they did and what those plates did, but they would bring the medicine. They would bring knowledge to the
Mm-hmm.
people. And one day they kind of decided that these star people were like, well, you guys are getting away from your origins. You're getting away from what you're supposed to be doing, and we're not going to come back anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the star people didn't want to go back, but they looked just like us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of crazy. Now, I'm not saying anyone, is half or a quarter or, a
Mm-hmm.
16th alien. I ain't saying none of that. I'm just saying
Maybe we all are.
maybe, there's something to that story that I have always, and my grandpa, that was one of his thought. Like that was one thing that he always said. He would talk about it. It's like, man, I wish I knew. I wish I could go back and see that. He always wanted to know where those plates were because those plates up until I think like the early 1900s were still around, and they got lost during removal and moving
Mm-hmm.
around and whatnot.
I had heard a story similar to that there was I think it's earth, wind, fire, and water, that there were 4 plate things like that. And like the say like the white people were given 1 plate, the white race was given 1, and they say like they controlled say maybe fire, and then the Indians controlled the land, and then the black people controlled the water, and then like the Asians controlled something else. I'd heard something similar to that. The game ward, like I said, I seen the game wards in there, seen those footprints. So then I went back to another area on the other side where this creek comes out, and there's another parking area up there because it's an area where you can deer hunt. So I had went back in and was taking pictures again, like I was telling you. And I don't know if you know what Orgone energy is. Do you know what a hex suit is? They make a hex suit that's for hunting. Like people can walk up on turkeys with it. Like it cancels out your biofield energy in your body. You know
Oh,
what I'm
okay,
talking about?
yeah.
Well, I make these things called they're orgone, basically orgone generators. I've studied a little bit about Wilhelm Reich and know how to make some different orgone cloudbusters, different things like that. And I had made these this orgone things, and when I wear those, like I don't know what it is, but when I wear them, it's like the deer, like how like I've hunted for so long that the deer, like whenever they come in, they will look right at you, even if you're not, like if I'm 20, 30 feet in the air, like they've got a 6th sense. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like they sense an energy coming off of you, and
Yeah.
they can see it. And I think it's attached that they're covered in hair, and that is attached to their nervous system, and somehow that acts as an antenna. That's kind of what I think. But anyway, these little devices that I make will knock that field off of your body. It takes your bioelectric field and it takes it in, and then it's works as a piezoelectric thing, a device, energy device. And it's not like witchcraft or anything like that. You can go on MIT and look up quartz crystals and the piezoelectric thing. That's basically what it is. You put quartz crystals under pressure and it'll do this. So anyway, that's what I use when I go in the woods and I'm looking for these things. And those pictures that I sent you, that thing peeking around the tree, I had those devices with me, and I went in there and I got all kinds of pictures that night, and I think I sent them to you.
Yeah.
But so I go back in there because I got all those pictures, and they was like nice, clear looking. I thought they was clearer than I'd ever gotten. pictures of like the face of that thing peeking around the tree, and then I got the picture of those Indians, look like Indians looking around the tree. And so I decided I'm gonna go back in there. Well, I go back in there a couple days later, and I'm around the corner to go there, and there's a black SUV sitting there with black tinted windows, and I thought, no, not going in there.
Oh
So
man.
I left there, and then probably about 3 or 4 days later, I go back in there. But I usually take this horse trail up in there because there's horse trails, crisscross through there. I usually take a horse trail and go back around in there and look and take my pictures. So I thought this time I'm going to go in off the road because my friend Bushwhacking Rooster, he looks for those X's and different structures. And so I went in an area where I found a structure down below where the horse trail was. Well, that takes you into the creek where I got all those photographs, right? So I go back in there and I'm getting into ground zero where I caught all the, the good footage and the pictures. I get in there and I'm looking up the hill up towards the horse trail, and I see something up there. It looks like, like hunters will chain like a tree stand to a tree, and they'll use it's like a chain, but it's like a cable thing, goes into a box with a lock. And I thought, what is that thing? Because the other day when I was in there, it wasn't there, because I had walked right by it and I would have seen it because I'm paying attention, And so I'm looking up there. So I went and I had the scales about straight up, grabbing hold of saplings, pulling my way up there. If I'd have fell, I'd have got hurt, and so because I thought, well, somebody's put a camera up there on the tree. And so I get up there, and there's this box, and it's probably about 1.5 feet wide, 1.5 feet tall, and probably about 10 or 12 inches deep. And it's got a lock. It's locked to a tree. And I thought, wow, the game wardens or somebody's come up in here, and they've put some kind of electronic device or a camera up there. So I go and I look around the front of it, and I couldn't find any hole for a camera. So I don't know what kind of device that thing was. I've never seen it before. Or ever seen one since, and I don't know what it was. So there was something going on in there. It was almost like they knew I'd been in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, well, I think they were trying to. What my thought is it's one of those frequency where they're trying to push those Bigfoot out of that area.
Yeah,
that could be what it was.
And here's another thing: the area where saw this activity, there's a major power line that runs through there. You know what I'm talking about? Like it cuts through. You know how they talk about they travel the power lines. And I got to looking on a map, and I Google Earth, and I followed that thing, and that power line goes all the way across over to where Squatch Man has his activity. So we kind of share the same trailway there.
Yeah.
So, and I think that this is what I think. I think they're in that area specifically because there's pawpaws in there, because a lot of these encounters and all this evidence that I've gotten has happened in September when the pawpaws are on. And
Okay.
I think they're eating the pawpaws.
Let's hear that Bigfoot story, man.
You want to hear the Bigfoot story? Okay.
I want to hear it. That's one of the.
All right.
Someone in chat said that. They say want to hear it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to open up the chat. Okay. All right. All right. So for you, Tony, for everybody in chat, all I can relay is what I experienced. Believe, not believe, that's 100% okay, because I was there. And I still don't know how much I believe it. I still have dreams about this shit. And it's not like Bigfoot's chasing me through the woods and going to pop my head off like a daisy, which he probably could have at that point. But it's just reliving it, just seeing the whole experience in my dreams. That's why I can remember it so well, which is really weird, because that's one of the things that I wish never happened to me, and I wish I couldn't remember, but I do. So where to begin? My friend, I'll call him D. It's like the first letter of his name. He's passed on. He passed away like 5 or 6 years ago at this point. And right now, anyway. Him and his dad would go on moose hunting trips up Maine every single year. And, they got a moose every year. It was really, it was friggin' awesome. I mean, I'm seeing the pictures, and I would go over to the house after they got back to hang out with him or go target shooting in, the side lot of their yard. And, you see in the barn, you see a big old moose hanging there. I was like, oh, that's really cool, and the old man's out there chopping it up, and he's got all the stuff to do it. I mean, his dad was an ex-Vietnam vet, and he was one of the crazy people that took extra tours because he liked it. I'm not saying anything about his character because the man was very kind and always nice to me. But anyway, Dennis asked, D asked me, do you want to go with us this year? We're going up to Oxford County. My dad, rented a cabin. And I was, sure, why not? Now, at that point in my life, I'm like 19 years old, and all I did was just drink and smoke and party and have a good time and cavort with women and just have a blast. You know what I mean? I that was like my phase right there. And I knew I was going out that next morning. I knew when I was going out that night to go hang out with my friends and get a drink on. I was going to be going on a hunting trip the next morning. So I packed a bag, get everything I needed, put my 30-30 in the back, everything I needed for that trip. And I went out, partied with my buddies, and I showed up at their house at like 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what he told me to be there for. Because at this time, there was no such thing as cell phones. And I'm like, dude, don't call the house because I ain't going to be home. I'll be there. And I show up, hadn't slept. I throw all my shit in the back of their Bronco. And they had like one of those like 1981 or 2 full-size Ford Broncos, big thing, lifted the whole 9 yards. And I laid down in the back seat, passed out. Probably, I don't know how long the trip took. I think I was told the trip took like about almost 5 hours to get there. And I remember waking up because I'm like being rattled awake. And I'm in the back of this Bronco and I sit up and it's daylight and we're on this like access logging road, dude. And the trees are so close to the Bronco. I'm like, wow, where the hell are we, man? And then his old man takes this turn down a trail that I just thought was a walking trail. And I don't know how he fit that big Ford down that trail because I swear to God, dude, on either side, the man was a genius behind the wheel. Dude, he had so much skill because it must have been like a 1/4 of an inch on either side of the vehicle running that big old Bronco right down this little trail. And have you ever seen the movie The Evil Dead?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so picture the cabin from The Evil Dead.
Okay.
We roll up into this little area in front of a cabin, and that's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, oh my God, this is the fucking Evil Dead. I'm like, am I going to find the Necronomicon inside there? I'm just like, wow. I mean, this thing, we get out of the vehicle, and I imagine you have, but if you've been so far out into the wilderness or the woods that you can hear birds and like normal wildlife sounds, but yet the silence is so deafening at the same time. It's like absolutely beautiful, but intimidating AF when you're out there. And we get into the cabin, and I expected the cabin to look on the inside like it did on the outside. Fucking horrifying. Sorry, can I swear or should I not?
Let it rip, man. I mean,
okay,
hey,
man.
Keep it to a minimum, but yeah. I mean,
okay, I got you. Sorry if your kids are listening. Anybody, sorry about that. I'm just getting into it, man. Yeah, so
I know. Hey, you're telling a story that's that's been on your mind for however for all these years.
Oh God, God, it sucks. But anyway, we get into, and the cabin actually was really. It was nice. It wasn't too bad. A little dusty in there, but I mean, it looks like somebody had stayed there recently. And I mean, I'd given this story to a lady here in Maine named Michelle Soulier, who is a Bigfoot researcher, and she came out with a book called Bigfoot in Maine. I would recommend that if you like the subject of Bigfoot and the history of it in the state, you know what I mean, in any given place. I would recommend anybody in the chat to go to search up Bigfoot in Maine by Michelle Soulier, or you can go to like thegreenhandbookshop.com, something like that. I think you can get it on Amazon. It's not a very long read and it's not expensive, but I have a copy of it. She sent it to me because she was on my podcast at one time. And it's a fantastic book. It's a fun read, great stories, and she does a really good job of digging in the history. She wanted me to help her try to find this cabin, and I'm like, listen, I've lived through it. I don't want to revisit it that much more. You know what I mean? So if you don't want to use my story, that's fine. I'm not going to take it to heart. You're still my friend, but I've been there, done that. I don't really want to revisit it other than telling the story again. Anyway, so the short of it was that we probably had about a half a day. I think we got there, let's see if it was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think we got there somewhere around 11 or noon. We made decent time, but those old logging roads and trails were so bumpy. I mean, we were going at a snail's pace going down these roads. But so my buddy's dad grabs his rifle, puts his his Marco Polo cap on, whatever hat he was wearing. It was this weird hat. And he just takes off into the woods like he lived there. I'm like, all right, rock and roll. At the time, my buddy, was a very, very large man. He was like 6'1", but he was like 350 pounds. Like he could have been a lineman in the National Football League, a big boy. So he didn't walk very far. And I think that we probably went, I don't know, quarter of a mile, if that, behind the cabin itself. And we found an area that had like, it was kind of like, if you've ever been walking through the woods and you've got like a lot of dense brush and you're walking through shrubbery and all that stuff, and you come out into an area where it's a little bit open and there's like a few trees and you can see kind of crisscrossing game trails where you can plainly see like the deer and the moose and every other animal is running or walking through there. That's kind of exactly what it looked like. And there was this one little area where, like, because it was weird because it was a trail leading in, which we were on, and there was a walking trail kind of leading out on the other side. But basically it was like this kind of octagonal shaped area that had all kinds of thicket or heavy brush lining it. It was one of the weirdest things. Not weird now, but at the time I'd never really seen anything like that. And behind one of these like shrubbery walls, as I always called them, was a tree that had fallen down, and you could sit down on that tree and you could poke a gun barrel. And because there were spots in the brush where you could poke a gun barrel through and see, and if there was an animal there, dude, it was like the perfect natural hunting blind. So that's where we said we were going to hunt. We go back to the cabin, and the three of us are just light up a fire, had a pot, eating beans and hot dogs, and having a grand old time shooting the breeze. Fast forward, we get up early, butt crack of dawn, and his old man takes off into the woods. He found the spot he wanted to be in. We walk out to the spot we found the afternoon previous, and we're just kind of sitting there, and the sun is just barely starting to come up. You know what I mean? Like when the sun starts to rise above, you kind of almost get that like reddish glow from the very early morning. And we're probably sitting there 10 or 15 minutes, and we thought we hit the jackpot because there was something big coming our way it sounded probably like it was like a couple 100 yards away. We thought it was a moose, because moose, if you've never been around one, they are very large, heavy animals that just stomp through everything. Much like what we just saw. We were about to see, I should say. And as this thing is getting closer, the wind is blowing at us, so we are actually downwind. And it was kind of like, if you've ever been in a musty basement that had a really heavy smell to it, times that by about 50 with a really strong urine smell. So it was enough to burn your nose and eyes.
Oh, man.
And this thing is coming, and you can hear it better. And I'm like, dude. And he's like, there's a moose coming. I'm like, I don't think that's a moose. It's 2 legs. He's like, you don't know what you're hearing. You've never done that before. I'm like, I have hunted deer before. I am not stupid. That's not a moose. That's walking on 2 legs. He's like, no, it's a moose. He's all excited, man, because his dad always shot a moose every year. He never got the chance, so he wanted to really bad. Like, it's like the one ring. He needed it. It was his precious. So there was that 1 second where the footfalls and the smell, it was so strong. I can almost smell it now, recalling this. And it was like a second before this thing came through the thicket that it was like eye of the storm. Everything got really, really quiet. It was almost like somebody hit the mute button, and then all of a sudden, poof, this thing comes walking through the thickets. We're only about 25 feet away from this thing, 20 feet away. And this thing stops and just kind of turns its whole upper body and goes, "Vroom," and looks right down at us. I was like, oh, shoot. We're both shaking. We both peed all over ourselves. Because as far as I could see, that was an effing monster, dude. I didn't know what the hell that was. I had no inkling, never even heard of a Bigfoot. Didn't know that's what it was. And this thing's looking at me. I'm looking at him. D, right next to me, is shaking like a friggin' chihuahua when it's too cold outside. Picture that one. 300-mile man shaking like a chihuahua when it's too cold out. And
Man.
he's got a 30-40 Craig sitting in his lap, which is a big gun. That shoots a big bullet, man. And he's shaking, trying to lift it. And I just put my hand on his and like, no, don't do that. I don't want to die, dude. Because if this thing wanted to, it could have taken a step and reached over with its big long arms and hands and popped my head off like a daisy. I was not about to have all that smoke. And big, and you know what's weird is looking at this thing's face. I can understand why, you know, a good Bigfoot picture when you see one, right? Like, even if it's a nice clear one, or you see footage where you think it's legit, but you can't see the face.
Yeah.
There's no hair on the face of these things. There's hair all around the face of it. So it makes like this weird natural shadow. Like, I'm staring right into these big round hubcap eyes this thing has. And I can only see half of its face. I know it was there, but it was just this weird shadow. You know what I mean? The what's the word? Slightly cone-shaped head. Its deltoids were as big as my head, dude. Just this massive monstrosity. Long hair. I mean, but weird because there wasn't that much hair on the chest. You know what I mean? You could tell it had big old pecs and a 6-pack, or like probably like a 30-pack because it was monstrous. And I don't know. It felt like 5 minutes we were standing there staring at each other, and it just snorted and walked away. Now, this is a decent sized clearing, dude. I don't know. It would have taken me quite a few steps to get across it, saying that. And from sitting down, dude, this looked like a 10-footer. He was big, real big. Like this brush, just let me see what I can. Okay. I'm not going to try to be vulgar in this situation, but I'm sitting down on a tree. I'm 5'8". Okay. I'm 5'8", 5'7", 5'8". I'm sitting down on this like down tree, and this like shrubbery in front of me is probably coming up to about 3 or 4 inches above my head. Okay. So if I wanted to see the game trail, I had to look through the holes in it. I'm looking up at this thing, and I could see he was a boy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's how big this thing was, how close it was to us. Dude, I kid you not. 3 good long steps, and it was in through the shrubbery on the other side and gone.
Man.
Yeah. Now, you know how people talk about infrasound?
Yes.
I think there's something to that. There's something, maybe not that, but weird, because it was probably 5 seconds, 5 or 6 seconds. It was really quick. Right after this thing went through the shrubbery on the other side on its way, it let out a howl. It was so freaking loud, it hurt my ears. Like I had to cover my ears, and it was still too loud. And we sat there probably for a good 40, 45 minutes after that. And I was just so confused and dizzy and drowsy. And I think I drooled on myself a little bit. And probably after that amount of time, my head felt like it started to clear up enough that we could stand up and walk back to the cabin. And Dennis D said his name. Screw it. He goes and lights a fire, and we're both sitting by the fire, and we sat there for a while. We heard a gunshot, And a little while later, his dad comes back. He shot a deer. He's like, didn't see a moose. And he's dragging this thing. And he goes and he does whatever he's going to do with it. And he comes back and he's like, what's the matter with you guys? And I just kind of looked at him. He's like, oh. And we both kind of looked at him like, what do you mean by oh? He's like, oh, that? You saw what yelled? Oh, man, those were like the rock apes in Nam. And he just turns around and goes the other way. I'm like, can you explain that to me, please?
That's insane. That is insane.
For, like I said, D, he passed away from because of diabetes. He didn't take care of himself, man. You know, it sucked. But we were still pretty close after that. But he would never talk about it. That was like one of those subjects. Like I tried 1,000 times, and every time he shut the door. He's like, I'm like, you remember? He's like, I don't remember anything. That never happened. And I'm like, it sure as shit did happen because I pissed all over myself, dude. I didn't imagine that. I mean, I'm not a toddler, dude. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He took it to the grave with him. He would never speak of it. Never.
Let me ask you this real quick. So he said that he saw, it sounded like rock apes in Vietnam. Did he tell you any of those stories? Or did he
You know what's funny?
them?
You know what's funny? He talked about it a little bit that night after he got the deer hung and he gutted it hung. Because the gunshot sounded close. So I don't think he was that far away. I think he was on his way back to us to come have lunch, to the cabin to have lunch. And the deer just came across and he, boom, took it. Because we were there for another couple of days, and my buddy and I never went back out in the woods. He didn't want to go out in the woods. He was just pretty much done at that point. So we just kind of hung out around the fire pit, and we would drink beers and shoot the breeze and all that stuff. But his dad went out a few, those other couple days we were there, because we were there for 3 days. And he said he saw moose, but he was never able to get a shot off on him. So it must have been an unshootable position, because this dude I've seen him at the range at his house from 100 yards away, pow, put a fucking bullseye right into a small paper target. So, with a scope, and he was using a 300 Win Mag. So, I mean, there was a big hole in that deer. I'm going to tell you right now. Why I didn't use a deer gun, I don't know, but I'd have to ask him. But anyway, that night he was talking about, he's like, yeah, he goes, you guys would call them Bigfoot. And I'm like, what's a Bigfoot? He's like, you don't know what that is? I'm like, I never heard of that. He goes, well, you just saw one, didn't you? I'm like, I saw something. I saw a monster, but I don't know what that was. He's like, yeah, we used to call those rock apes in Vietnam. It was because there would be platoons of us or squads or companies of us that would go out going after the VC. And you would have these big hairy things that would be trailing us. They looked like giant 8, 9, 10 foot tall monkeys walking on 2 legs like we do. Not like, how you see a chimpanzee walk. He goes, they walk like we do. But it would come to a certain point that we would have to watch out for the VC, and we'd have to watch out for them, because they would throw big rocks at us. So we'd just shoot at them, and we hit them a couple times, and they would fall down, get back up, run away. He goes, well, I don't think we ever killed one that we know of. But I was just like blown away, dude. I'm like, really? And you can go and look that stuff up. And there a lot of soldiers, there are stories that have come out of the Vietnam era that talked about rock apes. And there's also stories about the lizard men of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which he said that there's been experiences that he's had and other guys like him have had on the trail like that before. So I'm like, Jesus, dude. He goes, because it's fun. You find these random caves, and they stunk horribly. And there was a few guys that had told him, when they would mix companies, or a company or a platoon would get shot down a lot, and then they would mix with another one, so they'd make new ones. And there were a lot of guys that were talking about lizard men coming out of caves after them, with these big walking lizards, and it's just like in rock apes. And I'm like, dude, it wasn't. I think it was like a couple of days after we had come home. I worked second shift in a restaurant at the time, and I still lived with my parents. I came home that night, and I got on the couch, put a blanket on myself. I was watching a TV show. Well, I apparently had passed right out, and the TV was still on, and I think I woke up somewhere around 4 or 5 in the morning. And I'm opening my eyes and I'm looking at this, and there's this, the Patterson Gimlin film.
Mm-hmm.
They were showing whatever show this was, a documentary that was on, was showing the Patterson Gimlin film, and I was instantly awake because that's what I saw, minus the memories. So, like I said, this was a boy, but what was on the Patterson Gimlin film walked and looked exactly like what I saw in the woods that day. And I was just like, dude. And so I kept watching it. And they're like, this is Bigfoot, or known as Sasquatch. Many names, wood booger. And I'm like, wood booger? Like, that's a fun one. But yeah, so that was my introduction to that fun.
Man, that's a great story too, man. Because like, especially seeing the detail that you've seen, and really, that's a lot of the, I guess you could say, a lot of the people that see that, Bigfoot, is they don't really want to talk about it. They see it, and especially with you guys seeing it really that close. I can definitely see your buddy just being like, yeah, no, never talking about it again.
Oh, don't get me wrong. It was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I mean, I call it a nightmare. To me, it's a nightmare. It's not, I guess, not as bad now as it was, but just reliving that in my head when I'm sleeping at night dude, I wake up in I kind of like, how you scare yourself awake type of thing. I can understand why you can never get a clear picture of one of these things. Why it's hard, you know what I mean? Like, because people are like, well, if you don't see a body, it didn't happen. Or, dude, this thing was like a hairy tank on legs. I mean, I picture 2 Arnold Schwarzeneggers, then you're looking at the muscle definition of what this thing looked like. I mean, it had a lot of hair and it was long, but you could clearly see that thing was like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Type of thing. It's just like, why are you looking at me? It's like a giant hairy Arnold. I mean, it was so massive and strong, and it moved so fast and so fluid. Like, something that big, to me, to move in that way is almost like an oxymoron. And I mean, I've told people this story before, and they've laughed right in my face. So that's why I say to you and everyone in the chat, thank you for listening to my story. I really appreciate you guys welcoming me in, but believe, don't believe, that's 100%, up to you guys. Just, take it for what it's worth. I was there, type of thing. And I'm not trying to sound like a jerk when I say this. I have no a-hole intentions when I say it, but if you believe it, great. If you don't, that's fine too, because I was there. I know what I saw. You know what I mean? And it was like, I wish I hadn't have seen it, truthfully.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's a pretty crazy encounter, man. I've heard a lot of stories from different people, and a lot of times it's hear something, but that's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that with us, man.